When 8-year-old Emma Blackwood vanished from the luxury shopping mall, her billionaire mother called the FBI, the state police, and private investigators. But it was Marcus Williams, the security guard everyone ignored, who found her using skills he'd never told anyone about. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The Galleria at Westfield was more than just a shopping mall. It was a temple of luxury consumption where Manhattan's elite came to spend money with the casual indifference of people who had never worried about paying bills. On this particular Saturday afternoon in October, the marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers while well-dressed shoppers moved between boutiques that charged more for a handbag than most people earned in a year. Victoria Blackwood stood in the center of the mall's grand atrium, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as she clutched her phone. At 42, she was the widow of tech mogul Robert Blackwood and the heir to a $1.8 billion fortune built on software patents and real estate investments. She was accustomed to problems that could be solved with money, influence, or a carefully placed phone call. But this problem was different. Her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, had vanished. "I don't care what it costs," Victoria spoke urgently into her phone. "I want every available agent from the FBI field office here within the hour. Contact the NYPD's Special Victims Unit. Call Morrison Security. They handle kidnapping cases for Fortune 500 executives." Victoria had always lived in a world where money could buy solutions to any crisis. Need the best medical care? Write a check. Want your child in the most exclusive private school? Make a donation? Facing a business problem? Hire the most expensive consultants available? But as she stood in the luxurious mall where she had been shopping with Emma just 30 minutes earlier, Victoria was discovering that some problems couldn't be purchased away. The last time she had seen Emma, her daughter had been looking at a display of stuffed animals in the toy store, while Victoria examined an $8,000 designer dress that had caught her eye. When Victoria turned around 5 minutes later, Emma was gone. The store employees claimed they hadn't seen her leave. Security cameras in that particular corner had somehow malfunctioned. And now, despite Victoria's frantic calls to every law enforcement agency she could think of, her daughter seemed to have vanished without a trace. "Ma'am," a calm voice said behind her, "I'm Marcus Williams, head of security for the mall. I understand your daughter's missing." Victoria turned to see a tall black man in his early 40s, wearing the navy blue uniform of mall security. He had an intelligent face and carried himself with quiet confidence, but Victoria barely registered his presence. In her world, security guards were part of the background infrastructure, people who existed to open doors and watch monitors, not to solve complex problems. "Yes, my daughter Emma is missing," Victoria said impatiently, barely making eye contact with Marcus. "I've already called the FBI. They should be here soon to handle this properly." Marcus nodded patiently. He had worked at the Galleria for 3 years and had encountered Victoria Blackwood dozens of times. She was the type of wealthy patron who looked right through service employees as if they were invisible. He doubted she even knew his name, despite the fact that he had personally ensured her safety and that of her daughter during every visit to the mall. "Ma'am, with respect, the FBI response time in Manhattan for non-terrorist cases is typically 45 minutes to an hour," Marcus said calmly. "In missing child cases, the first hour is crucial. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about Emma while we wait for the federal agents to arrive?" Victoria looked at him with barely concealed irritation. "I don't think a mall security guard is qualified to handle a kidnapping case. This requires real professionals." Marcus absorbed the dismissive comment without changing his expression. He had heard similar statements countless times over the past 3 years. What Victoria didn't know, what none of the wealthy patrons of the Galleria knew, was that Marcus Williams had spent 12 years as a special agent with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, specializing in child abduction cases. He had found 67 missing children during his federal career, using psychological profiling techniques that had earned him commendations from 3 different FBI directors. He had left the Bureau 3 years earlier, after a case involving the abduction of a 6-year-old girl in Detroit had gone tragically wrong. Despite Marcus's accurate profile and recommendations, local law enforcement had ignored his advice and pursued their own leads. By the time they followed Marcus's suggestions, it was too late. The child's death had haunted Marcus so deeply that he couldn't continue in federal law enforcement. The Galleria security job was supposed to be a quiet retirement from the high-stakes world of criminal profiling. But now, standing in front of a frantic mother while an 8-year-old child was potentially in danger, Marcus felt his old instincts awakening. "Mrs. Blackwood," Marcus said, using her name deliberately to get her attention, "I understand you want the best people working on this case. But right now, I'm the person who's here, and I know this mall better than anyone. Can you tell me exactly what Emma was wearing?" Victoria was about to dismiss him again when something in Marcus's tone made her pause. There was an authority in his voice that didn't match his uniform, a professional competence that seemed out of place for a mall security guard. "She's wearing a pink dress with white flowers," Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly. "White sneakers. She has long blonde hair and pigtails. She's 8 years old, but small for her age. She could pass for 6. Marcus was already taking notes in a small notebook he had pulled from his pocket. His questions were precise and systematic, covering details that Victoria hadn't even thought about. "Any behavioral changes recently? New fears, reluctance to go certain places, mentions of strangers talking to her?" Victoria shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Emma's always been outgoing, friendly with everyone." "What about custody issues? Any former partners, business associates, or family members who might have grievances against you?" "No," Victoria said, then paused. "Well, there was my late husband's brother, but he lives in California and we haven't spoken in 2 years. Marcus made another note. "Tell me exactly what happened in the 30 minutes before you noticed she was missing." As Victoria recounted the sequence of events, Marcus was already building a psychological profile in his mind. 8-year-old girl, upper-class background, comfortable with strangers, disappeared from a secure environment during daylight hours. The circumstances suggested either a crime of opportunity or a targeted abduction by someone who knew the family's routine. "Mrs. Blackwood," Marcus said after Victoria finished her account, "I need you to think carefully. In the weeks before today, have you noticed anyone paying unusual attention to Emma? Taking photos, asking questions about her schedule, showing up in multiple locations where you shop?" Victoria's eyes widened. "How did you... yes, there was a man at the country club last week who seemed to be watching Emma during her tennis lesson, and someone was taking pictures at her school during pickup on Thursday. I thought it was just another parent." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't a random abduction. Someone had been surveilling the family, learning their routines, waiting for the right opportunity. "Ma'am, I need to check our security footage immediately," Marcus said. "But first, I need you to call your bank and credit card companies. If this is a targeted kidnapping, the perpetrator may have inside information about your financial accounts." "Why would you know about that?" Victoria asked, studying Marcus more carefully for the first time. Marcus hesitated. He had spent 3 years hiding his background, seeking anonymity after the trauma of his final FBI case. But with a child's life potentially at stake, secrecy was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Because I spent 12 years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit," Marcus said quietly. "I specialized in child abduction cases. I've worked kidnappings involving some of the wealthiest families in America." Victoria stared at him in shock. "Your FBI?" "Former FBI," Marcus corrected. "I've been working security here for 3 years, but, Mrs. Blackwood, right now that doesn't matter. What matters is finding Emma before whoever took her has time to get too far away." The transformation in Victoria's attitude was immediate and complete. The condescending dismissal disappeared, replaced by desperate hope. "What do you need me to do?" "First, I need you to stay calm and visible," Marcus said, already moving toward the security office. "If this is a kidnapping for ransom, they'll want to contact you. Second, I need a recent photo of Emma and a list of everyone who has access to your family's schedule. Nannies, drivers, housekeepers, personal assistants." As they walked quickly through the mall, Marcus was already analyzing the physical environment with the trained eye of a federal profiler. The Galleria had 4 main entrances: 2 parking garage connections, and a service corridor that connected to the adjacent office building. If someone had taken Emma, they would need to get her out of the building without attracting attention. That meant either a service exit or one of the parking garage connections. In the security office, Marcus immediately pulled up footage from the cameras surrounding the toy store where Emma had disappeared. What he saw made his blood run cold. "There," he said, pointing to a figure on the monitor. "Do you recognize this man?" Victoria leaned forward to look at the screen. A tall man in a baseball cap and dark jacket was visible in the background of several shots, always keeping Emma in his line of sight but never approaching directly. I think that might be the man from the country club," Victoria whispered, "the one I thought was watching Emma's tennis lesson." Marcus was already switching to cameras from other parts of the mall, tracking the man's movement through the building. The suspect had clearly planned this carefully, avoiding direct camera angles and using the mall's blind spots to his advantage, but Marcus had worked enough cases to know that even careful criminals made mistakes. "Got him," Marcus said, freezing the image on a camera near the north parking garage. The man was visible carrying what appeared to be a sleeping child wrapped in a jacket. "They're heading for the parking garage. Mrs. Blackwood, I need you to call 911 and tell them we have a confirmed child abduction in progress. Give them this license plate number." Marcus zoomed in on a white van visible in the background of the shot. The license plate was partially obscured, but Marcus could make out enough digits to provide a useful lead to law enforcement. "What about the FBI?" Victoria asked. "Shouldn't we wait for the federal agents?" "Ma'am, we don't have time to wait," Marcus said, already moving toward the door. "Every minute that passes makes it exponentially harder to recover a kidnapped child safely. I'm going to follow them." "You can't go alone," Victoria protested. "What if they're armed? What if there are multiple suspects?" Marcus paused at the door. For a moment, he was back in Detroit 3 years earlier, standing in a similar situation, knowing that his next decision could mean the difference between a child coming home safely or never coming home at all. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly, "finding missing children is what I do. It's what I've always done, and I'm very good at it." What Marcus didn't tell Victoria was that he had already identified the likely profile of their suspect. Male, mid-30s to early 40s, probably unmarried or recently divorced, with possible financial difficulties that made him view the Blackwood family as a target of opportunity. The careful surveillance suggested intelligence and planning ability, but the decision to take Emma from a crowded public place indicated desperation or overconfidence. These factors created a psychological profile that Marcus could use to predict the suspect's next moves. As Marcus left the security office and headed for his car, he was already mentally mapping the most likely routes the kidnapper would take out of Manhattan. The FBI would arrive soon and bring their superior resources to bear on the case, but Marcus had something the federal agents wouldn't: intimate knowledge of how predators thought, how they made decisions under pressure, and most importantly, how they could be found. 25 minutes later, Marcus was driving through Queens, following a hunch that had saved children's lives dozens of times during his federal career. The kidnapper would want to get out of Manhattan quickly, but he wouldn't go too far initially. He would need a secure location where he could contact Victoria about ransom demands, somewhere he felt in control. Marcus's phone rang. It was Victoria. "The FBI is here," she said. "They want to know where you are. They're setting up a command center and want to coordinate with you." "Tell them I'm following the suspect vehicle eastbound on the Long Island Expressway," Marcus said. "License plate Whiskey Hotel 749. Something, something. White Ford van, probably 2018 or 2019. "How do you know all that?" Victoria asked. "Because I've done this before," Marcus replied. "Mrs. Blackwood, I need you to stay near your phone. If the kidnapper calls, keep him talking as long as possible. Ask to speak to Emma. Ask for proof that she's safe. The FBI will have people there to trace the call." What Marcus didn't say was that his greatest fear wasn't that the kidnapper would ask for ransom money. His fear was that this wasn't about money at all. Some child abductors were motivated by financial gain, but others had darker purposes, and those cases rarely ended well. Following his instincts and years of experience, Marcus took an exit off the expressway and headed toward an industrial area he had identified on the security footage analysis. The kidnapper had been wearing work clothes under his jacket, suggesting familiarity with blue-collar environments. There were several abandoned warehouses in this area that would provide the privacy and control a kidnapper would need. As Marcus drove slowly through the industrial district, his trained eyes scanned every building, every parked vehicle, every potential hiding place. Then he saw it. The white van, parked behind a warehouse that appeared to have been vacant for months. Marcus called 911 immediately, providing his location and requesting police backup. But as he watched the warehouse, he saw something that made his blood freeze, smoke coming from one of the windows. The building was on fire. Without waiting for backup, Marcus grabbed the emergency kit from his trunk and ran toward the warehouse. He had faced this exact scenario before, a kidnapper who realized he was trapped and decided to eliminate all evidence, including the victim. The front door of the warehouse was locked, but Marcus found a broken window on the side of the building. As he climbed through, the smoke was already thick enough to make breathing difficult. He could hear sirens in the distance, but they wouldn't arrive in time if Emma was trapped inside a burning building. "Emma," Marcus called out. "Emma Blackwood, my name is Marcus. Your mother sent me to find you." A faint cry came from somewhere in the back of the warehouse. Marcus followed the sound, using his flashlight to navigate through the smoke and debris. In a small office at the rear of the building, he found Emma tied to a chair, conscious but clearly terrified. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said gently as he untied her restraints. "You're safe now. I'm going to get you out of here." "The bad man said he was going to hurt me," Emma sobbed as Marcus lifted her in his arms. "The bad man is gone," Marcus said, carrying her toward the window he had used to enter, "and he's never going to hurt you or anyone else again." As they emerged from the burning warehouse, police cars and fire trucks were arriving on the scene. Marcus handed Emma to a paramedic, then immediately began coordinating with the responding officers to search for the kidnapper, who had apparently fled when he realized his location had been discovered. 2 hours later, the kidnapper was in custody. Just as Marcus had profiled, he was a 38-year-old unemployed contractor who had been surveilling wealthy families in Manhattan, looking for kidnapping opportunities. He had targeted Emma because he had observed the family's routine and knew Victoria's schedule well enough to predict when she would be distracted during shopping trips. At the hospital, where Emma was being examined as a precautionary measure, Victoria found Marcus sitting in the waiting room, filling out paperwork for the FBI agents who had arrived on the scene. "I don't know how to thank you," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my daughter's life." Marcus looked up from his paperwork. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No," Victoria said firmly. "This wasn't your job. Your job was to watch the mall's security cameras and make sure the store's locked up properly at night. What you did today? That was something else entirely." She sat down beside him, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. 12 years with the FBI. How many children did you save?" 67, Marcus said quietly. "Before today." "And now 68, Victoria said. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone at the mall about your background?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because I left the FBI after a case went wrong. A little girl died because the local police ignored my profile and followed their own leads instead. I couldn't handle the responsibility anymore, knowing that my recommendations could mean the difference between a child living or dying." "But you came out of retirement today," Victoria observed, "for Emma." "Some things are more important than personal comfort," Marcus replied. "Emma needed help, and I was the person best qualified to provide it. That's all that mattered." Victoria felt a profound shift in her understanding of the world around her. For 3 years, she had walked past Marcus Williams dozens of times, seeing only a uniform and making assumptions about his capabilities based on his job title. She had never imagined that the quiet security guard was one of the most qualified law enforcement professionals she would ever encounter. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I owe you an apology, not just for today, but for the past 3 years. I treated you like you were invisible, like your only value was opening doors and watching monitors." "Mrs. Blackwood," You don't need to— Yes, I do, Victoria interrupted. I need to apologize, and I need to ask you something. The FBI agent in charge told me they're trying to convince you to come back to federal law enforcement. He said you were one of the best profilers they ever had. Marcus nodded. Agent Crawford has been persistent, but I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to that world. What if there was another option? Victoria asked. What if you could use your skills to help families like mine without the bureaucracy and politics of federal law enforcement? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that I'd like to hire you to run a private investigation firm specializing in missing children cases. Full funding, your own team, complete autonomy to handle cases the way you think they should be handled. Marcus stared at her in surprise. Mrs. Blackwood, I appreciate the offer, but it's not charity, Victoria said firmly. It's recognition of expertise. Today, you proved that you're the most qualified person I've ever met to handle these kinds of cases. There are other families out there who need that expertise. Families who can't afford to wait for federal agencies to respond or who fall through the cracks of overworked local police departments. She paused, looking toward the hospital room where Emma was being examined. My daughter is safe because you were in the right place at the right time with the right skills. How many other children could be saved if those skills were more widely available? 3 months later, the Williams Investigation Group occupied a suite of offices in a modern building overlooking Central Park. Marcus had assembled a team of former law enforcement professionals, retired federal agents, and consulting psychologists who specialized in missing persons cases. The firm's first major case had been a success. A 7-year-old boy who had been abducted from a playground in Chicago was recovered safely within 18 hours of the family's initial call. Marcus's psychological profile had led directly to the suspect's capture and the child's rescue. But the transformation that meant the most to Marcus wasn't professional. It was personal. Emma Blackwood had become a regular visitor to the WIG offices, often stopping by after school to do her homework in the conference room, while Victoria attended meetings about the foundation she had established to support families of missing children. Mr. Marcus, Emma said one afternoon as she worked on a math assignment, my mom says you used to catch bad guys for the government. That's right, Marcus replied, looking up from case files he was reviewing. And now you catch bad guys for regular people. Something like that. Emma considered this for a moment. I think catching bad guys for regular people is better, she announced, because regular people need help too, and they don't have as many people trying to help them. Marcus smiled, struck by the 8-year-old's wisdom. I think you might be right about that, Emma. 6 months after Emma's rescue, Marcus received a call that would test everything he had learned about his new mission. A 5-year-old girl had disappeared from a low-income neighborhood in the Bronx. The family couldn't afford private investigators, and the overworked local police had classified it as a runaway case despite the child's age. We'll take the case, Marcus told Victoria when she brought him the details. Pro bono. Are you sure? Victoria asked. This kind of case could take weeks, and we won't recover any of the operating costs. Mrs. Blackwood, Marcus said, the day you found out Emma was missing, you called the FBI, the state police, and private security firms. You had resources that most families don't have. This little girl in the Bronx deserves the same level of effort and expertise, regardless of her family's ability to pay for it. Victoria smiled, realizing that Marcus had learned something she was still discovering herself. That true security didn't come from wealth or privilege, but from knowing that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, deserved protection and justice. The case in the Bronx was solved within 72 hours. The 5-year-old girl was found safe, and her abductor was arrested. But more importantly, the success of the case led to media attention that brought the Williams Investigation Group to the attention of families across the country who had given up hope of finding their missing children. 1 year after Emma's rescue, Marcus stood in front of a Senate subcommittee on missing and exploited children, testifying about the gaps in the current system and recommending changes to federal protocols for child abduction cases. The most important lesson I've learned, Marcus told the senators, is that expertise exists in unexpected places and that the person best qualified to solve a problem isn't always the person with the most impressive title or the biggest budget. He gestured to the gallery where Victoria and Emma sat watching the proceedings. A year ago, I was a mall security guard whose background and skills were invisible to most of the people I encountered every day. Today, I'm here because one family learned to see past assumptions and recognize that value doesn't always come in the package we expect. Senator Patricia Williams of Illinois leaned forward. Agent Williams, in your written testimony, you mentioned that private investigation firms have recovered missing children in cases where federal and local agencies were unsuccessful. What accounts for this difference in outcomes? Flexibility and focus, Marcus replied without hesitation. Private firms can pursue leads that fall outside standard protocols. We can dedicate the time and resources necessary for complex cases without worrying about budget constraints or bureaucratic approval processes. Most importantly, we can maintain focus on individual cases instead of managing dozens of investigations simultaneously. And the funding for these private investigations? Senator Williams asked. That's where we've seen the most innovation. The Blackwood Foundation has created a model where wealthy families who can afford private investigation services contribute to a fund that provides the same services to families who can't afford them. It's not charity. It's a recognition that child safety is a community responsibility, not just a government function. After the Senate hearing, as Marcus and Victoria walked out of the Capitol building, Emma skipped ahead of them, excitedly talking about getting to meet real senators. Do you ever regret leaving the FBI? Victoria asked. Never, Marcus replied immediately. At the Bureau, I was one agent among thousands, working within a system that sometimes moved too slowly to save lives. Now I can move as fast as necessary, use whatever resources are required, and focus entirely on getting children home safely. He watched Emma playing on the steps of the Capitol, a healthy, happy child who might not have survived if he had waited for federal protocols and procedures to work their slow way through the system. Besides, Marcus added, I've learned that the most meaningful work often happens when we stop trying to fit into other people's expectations and start using our talents to address the problems that matter most. 2 years after Emma's rescue, the Williams Investigation Group had recovered 89 missing children and had achieved a 94% success rate in cases involving abduction. The organization had expanded to include offices in 6 major cities and had trained local law enforcement agencies in rapid response protocols for child abduction cases. But perhaps the most significant change was in how Victoria Blackwood saw the world around her. The woman who had once looked through service employees as if they were invisible now made it a point to learn the names, backgrounds, and aspirations of everyone who worked in her building, managed her properties, or provided services to her family. You know what I realized, Victoria said to Marcus during one of their regular strategy meetings. I spent my whole life surrounded by people with impressive credentials and expensive educations, but I never learned as much from any of them as I learned from you that day in the mall. What did you learn? Marcus asked. That the most qualified person in the room isn't always the one with the fanciest title. That real expertise often comes from experience, not just education. And that if you want to solve difficult problems, you need to look for solutions in places where other people aren't looking. She paused, looking out the window at the bustling street below, where hundreds of people were going about their daily lives, each carrying their own stories, skills, and potential contributions to the world. Most importantly, I learned that everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, not just who they appear to be on the surface. Marcus nodded, thinking about all the families he had helped over the past 2 years, from billionaire executives to single mothers working minimum wage jobs. In every case, the desperation was the same. The love for their missing children was identical, and the relief when those children were found safely was equally profound. The amazing thing, Marcus said, is how many extraordinary people are hidden in plain sight, doing ordinary jobs while possessing extraordinary capabilities. Emma's case taught me that my FBI training wasn't wasted during those 3 years at the mall. It was just waiting for the right moment to be useful again. The story of Marcus Williams became more than just a tale of a missing child found and returned safely home. It became a symbol of the hidden potential that exists in every workplace, every community, and every person whose current circumstances don't reflect their true capabilities. Security firms across the country began conducting background reviews of their employees, discovering former military personnel, retired law enforcement officers, and other highly trained professionals who had been working in entry-level positions. The Williams Protocol became standard practice in the private security industry, the recognition that the most qualified person to handle an emergency might be the person others least expect. But the most powerful impact was on how people saw each other in their daily interactions. Victoria's story, which she shared frequently in interviews and speaking engagements, reminded audiences that assumptions based on job titles, uniforms, or appearances could blind us to the remarkable people who surround us every day. The morning Emma disappeared, Victoria would tell audiences, I was surrounded by potential solutions to my crisis, but I was too arrogant and narrow-minded to recognize them. Marcus Williams had the exact skills needed to save my daughter, but I almost missed that opportunity because I couldn't see past his uniform to the person wearing it. She would pause, letting the weight of that statement settle on her listeners. How many times do we do that in our daily lives? How many times do we overlook the expertise, the wisdom, the potential solutions that are right in front of us because they don't come in the package we expect? Emma, now 10 years old and thriving, had become an unofficial spokesperson for the foundation her mother had created. Her message was simple but profound. Sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you see every day but never really notice. My mom always taught me that important people wear suits and have big offices, but the most important person in my life wears a security uniform and carries a walkie-talkie. The truth that emerged from Emma Blackwood's rescue was both humbling and inspiring. That heroism often wears ordinary clothes, that expertise can be found in unexpected places, and that the people we overlook or dismiss might be exactly the people we need most when crisis strikes. Marcus Williams proved that your current job doesn't define your true capabilities, that past experience never loses its value, and that sometimes the most important qualification for solving a problem isn't your title or your salary. It's your willingness to care enough to act when action is needed most. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are Marcus Williams all around us, people whose backgrounds, skills, and potential contributions are hidden beneath assumptions we make based on their current circumstances. The most valuable discovery you can make isn't in a laboratory or a boardroom. It's in the recognition that extraordinary people often live ordinary lives, waiting for someone with the wisdom to see them and the courage to trust them with something that matters. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.